This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Blues Focus podcast with me, your host, John Graham. Once again, joined by Sam. Sam, how are tricks?
Tricks are good, thank you. How are your tricks?
You know what? You'd think I'd know better, to be honest. So after the last pod, when I'm like, I think it's probably fair to say quite bullish about our form up until Saturday. And I just couldn't, with everything was going on with Edwards not doing the press conference, then not being at the game, and like our form going into it, I just thought we were an absolute bolt on certainty. And it's the odds before the game were 2-1, and I just thought that was absolutely buying money. Thankfully, I didn't have a bet because I was toying with it, and I'm like, I just never. It's just again, it's just the hope that kills you, and you're like, yeah, and even reinforced by unchanged team again, and I just felt before the game everything was pointing in the right direction, and yeah, it just wasn't meant to be. So it's the thing is we seem to be getting. It's like that next win gets us right in the mixer, doesn't it? So we get to the point where the next win's going to get us there, and we don't win. You're like shit, and then you're sort of back to square one a little bit. But I think I was surprised that he picked the same team. I don't know why, because it should be just logical. I'm just not used to seeing it. But
Yeah.
were you surprised or?
I wasn't. Well, let me go back. So when we did the podcast, I was convinced it was the right thing to do. And then from reading various reports and watching different interviews and stuff like that, you get to sort of Saturday morning, you start thinking, actually, you could maybe start to make a case for, I think we touched on maybe like an Anderson for Gray, because Gray hasn't quite been, as we'd expect. And then there was always going to be this uncertainty over whether the Duck can do 3 games in a row, considering he's missed a lot of football. So the further I got through the week, the more likely I could see changes. So again, I think then when it came to it, sitting on the fence, FC, but I could kind of understand it both ways in the end. So I wasn't surprised other than just the Duck. And then I think, as we go into this pod, maybe it was a game too far for him. But, we weren't to know where with the form and the momentum that we carried from the previous 2 games. Logic would suggest carry on as you are. So,
well, I don't think he had a choice.
no,
I just certainly he could have probably got away with Damari. He wouldn't have got away with the Duck simply because he's been, instrumental in everything that's been good about what we've done over the last couple of games. So, and for me, it was just that mindset of it's just one last push, isn't it? We've got an international break coming up. Those players that have sort of recently come in, found a bit of form, found the right system, all that stuff. There must be a cloud 9. And even if they are running on empty, the momentum of the recent games and performances, I thought might just carry us through. But I stand by everything that I said. We play like we did in those 2 home games. We're going to be banging the argument for automatic. I absolutely stand by that. But ultimately we didn't have the same tie, did we? So very quickly, Paik gets injured, and you're like, is it going to be one of those days? But again, it's been a Blues fan, isn't it? You immediately go to, okay, well that's done that then, and just a bit. And we've said, we're not being after time, as we've said, certainly probably for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's the Paik that was at Blues when we first signed him, really dynamic, on the front foot, and he's been a really big part of everything that's been good about what we've been doing. So,
Yeah.
you know, do you think it was would you see it as a massive loss?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, we've both been very complimentary of Mark Leonard recently, and there was that spell when the results weren't perhaps going quite our way, but he was coming out with, as with a handful of others, but he was coming out with a lot of credit. Um, but there's, whatever we may think, in my opinion, going from Paik to Leonard is always going to be a downgrade, because I think I've described Paik as this before. He's kind of very good at everything and not an expert at anything. But when you bring in somebody like Leonard, he's not great at everything. So there's something missing. Whether that be I don't see him as being like a threat in the air, for example, whereas Paik wins his fair share of headers in the middle of the pitch, whereas Leonard isn't really going to do that for you. Paik also has the ability, if he wants to, and if he's allowed to drop a shoulder and leave whoever's marking him at the other side of the pitch, and he'll turn off and go and do something else. Whereas Leonard is going to be a little bit more predictable in terms of what he does. But it's not to say Leonard's not a good enough player to play at this level, because, as I say, we've talked about it a lot of times, and he certainly is. But it's definitely a drop off straight away. I don't mind a Leonard coming on when both teams are a little bit leggy and you just need a little bit of fresh enthusiasm onto the pitch. That's ideal time for Leonard in a lot of these sort of games. But so early on in the game, Middlesbrough are still completely fresh, aren't they? And they've got a lot of, when you look through their team, they've got a lot of players that have either been there a long time or have got a lot of experience. So you really could have done with somebody like a Paik who can create situations from nowhere. And that was, as soon as he was gone, that was one less player. I think we even talked about it in the last one, didn't we, about how we'd become this team of like 6 or 7 very positive, attack-minded players who can unlock anybody, and that was straight away sort of reduced. So it was always going to be hard, and you don't know how much impact that has on the rest of the team as well, because since Tuesday they've been in training and they've been working on their shape and their systems and whatnot, and 5 minutes in, that's all got to change, hasn't it? So yeah, it was always going to make it tough. But it's fine lines, isn't it, in this league? And unfortunately, we just fell the wrong side of that line this time.
Yeah, and I think if it was, I don't know. I'm with you to a degree. It is a downgrade, but I just think they're different. They're just different players,
Yeah,
and if it had been, it's tough, right? Because Doyle and Paik have been playing so well, but if Doyle got injured, or he'd have gone after 5 minutes, that's more of a like for like swap him
yeah.
and Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously not as good, and that's been demonstrated in the last few games. So I just feel that when you've got an Iwata at fullback and effectively a middle two, I know he comes in and helps out, and we've got players that come in and help out in midfield. But when you've got Doyle and Leonard as a two, I just think you can get overrun a little bit. I don't see. I wish I could, because they're great footballers, but Doyle has been that impressive. I think it did just knock us massively, because it was a bitty first half.
Yeah.
There was nothing in it at all in the game, and as it sort of we go on, certainly the second half, we definitely sort of improved. But so thoughts on the goal conceded?
Disappointing. I mean, the first one, we've talked about this before. We probably talked about it in more detail when things weren't going so well, because it was being sort of pushed into our face of all these sort of set piece sort of issues we were experiencing at both ends of the pitch. And I think obviously what we've done over the last 2 games before this is proved that we can be, well, more than that really, but over the last handful of games prior to this, we've proved to be effective from set pieces. We're still vulnerable at the back, and this whole, I know there's more to it than this, and you've still got a job to do, and they set you up in this system to give you the best chance of winning the ball. I understand all of that, but just taking away your most dominant player in the air and not putting him on their I know he didn't score with his head, but putting him up against their strongest threat in the box from that sort of situation, like I said, I think I could understand if 90% of the games we played this zonal slash man marking system, but every now and again you've just got to look and go, who are we up against?
Yeah.
And Millwall was a good example. And just on the day they weren't at the races, so it didn't cause us any problems. But you can't be left with a situation where Cochrane is having to try and mark their tallest, strongest player. And I just think that just to me doesn't quite work out. If they're desperate to play this sort of zonal system, pick your second or third strongest header of the ball to do that job rather than your number one
Yeah.
defensive threat. And I just think Clara, if you're gonna say to him, just don't matter where you are, just stay on the 6 yard box and try and win the header. It comes down to them having a good set piece delivery to just take him completely out of the game,
Yeah.
and that's that. So I just think we've got to be a little bit more shrewd in those situations and just maybe be a little bit more adaptable and go, okay, look at these big lumps coming forward now. They're going to be dangerous. Let's just make sure they're covered first. And then if we've still got space, put somebody in this zone but I just think, yeah, it's too focused on being zonal above all else. And when you've only got, I'll come on to the duck in a bit more detail, but when you've got basically just Clara and Newman in the back being your sort of height, you can't have them both doing a zonal job, which they both were.
Yeah.
And all it took was a little crowd of players. Clara's obviously tried to get to the ball, but he's nowhere near it, and he had no chance of getting there either. And lo and behold, they score. So yeah, disappointing. I kind of thought we might have turned a corner on set pieces, and I know we did score from one, but yeah, that frailty at the back still seems to be there, which is a shame.
Yeah, and I think look, there's a lot more focus. Or it feels like there's a lot more focus on dead balls now. I don't know whether it's just this season or I'm imagining it. I mean, because I've always been a big believer in if you're attacking and you win a free kick just inside their half or just inside your half, get everybody forward. Make
Yeah,
people defend. We don't quite do that yet, but we certainly. I mean, and again with Cochrane, I mean his delivery again at the weekend was superb. There was 3 or 4 that were just absolutely class. Not necessarily from dead ball, just in open play. And he's becoming it's all the time. He's a threat
yeah,
all the time. And it's quite nice that we've got a balance where on the right hand side we just tend to bomb on and we get the overload. And then on the left hand side, he doesn't need to beat a player. So he can knock those balls in from a little bit deeper. He doesn't need to go to the byline. But yeah, we talked again previously about common sense and having a common sense manager. We probably need to just extend that into, like you said, I just don't like zonal marking. Again, I'm old school. You just can't cover all eventualities in my opinion. I can
no,
understand why people do it, but certainly in this league, you're right. There's always, well, it seems to be there's always when we're defending a centre half from the opposition who's good for a few goals each season. It just always seems to be so. Yeah, but I mean, I think we probably got. Well, I think we got a little bit lucky. Certainly with our goal. I've seen them. I've seen them not given for a shove.
yeah.
I think the defender made a meal of it, and I think the referee probably saw through it, and yeah. But we've said it. We've said before about Damari. He's a game changer. He can do things that you know other players don't seem to be able to do. I mean, the goal that he scored, that back heel um, during the Millwall route, and then obviously he's done something to influence the game again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that the 2-1 goal. I mean, you talk me through it because I've got my own views on that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do better in terms of closing down the final shot. When I say the final shot, because I'm not going to claim the guy who scored has actually taken a shot there. I think he's just stuck a toe out and it's worked well for him. So when I say the shot, I can't think who the guy is who took the shot from the edge of the area, but that shot, I think there was 2 players at least who probably could have got to it. And I have a feeling in that split second where they have to make that decision, I feel like they both assumed the other person was going to get there, so they both kind of just didn't quite go for it. And I mean, look, one of the players that was on the edge of the box was Stansfield, so I'm not for a minute expecting him to know exactly what to do in that situation every time, because he's a lot deeper than you'd expect him to be. I'm not 100% sure who the other player was off the top of my head, but yeah, it looked as though they could have got there sooner. There's an argument that the shot was probably going towards Beadle, and he was sort of probably ready to just sort of take it in, maybe. And that flick, you see it all the time, don't you? At every level, just that little flick to just divert it off course. Most keepers are going to get beaten by that. So, it's unlucky. It's, as I say, I think there's elements where we could have done better. I think we've allowed them to cut inside a little bit too easily. We've allowed them to get the shot away. But after that, yeah, it's just rotten luck that goes in. And we've scored a lot of goals before half time recently and given ourselves that sort of fight going in at half time. Whereas to be on the receiving end of it is a bit of a sort of a killer, because then you've got 45 minutes of sort of resolute, hard working defensive units to try and break down. So yeah, it's a shame that we couldn't go in at 1-1. As I say, it's a bit of could have done better. It's a lot of luck as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness to the guy that scored, that it was the intention to do it.
Yeah.
But the reality is he probably does that 1 in 20.
Yeah.
To that, where the keeper's got no chance.
Yeah.
So I think there was an element of luck in it for the guy that scored. But yeah, it's. I don't want to be overcritical, because there is a slice of luck in there, and you can't legislate for it. And yes, they probably could have closed it down a bit better, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's. I think you just have to chalk it down to experience, and as you say, going into half time, 2-1 flattered them. It was. I think if it was 1-1, nobody's got any complaints. No. And it was really then, how do you react? Because it's all been, aside of Bristol City away, it's all been good news, hasn't it, recently? So they're going into the second half, and again, we start really quickly, and I just can't believe Stanno's missed that chance. I know. I mean, he got that close. I mean, he just done the defender, and okay, it's a bit like the goal he scored against Millwall. He just gets himself involved, and if anything's ricocheting, he's there, isn't he, to take it if it falls his way, and it definitely did that. And everything about the run was perfect.
Yeah.
And even just before he's going to strike the ball, he's opened his body up. And how many times have we seen that bent in the bottom right-hand corner? And I was absolutely convinced he was going to score. And that for me was definitely I've definitely been here before. Because that for me was, you score that goal literally just into the second half, they're gone, in my opinion. They're gone. They've got the nose ahead. It's 2-2. They haven't got a manager. Everything then starts to sort of, I think, sort of come into play, and it's the opposite effect. Keeps made a good save or an okay save, and it galvanises them again, doesn't it? But they were just, I think the thing for me, if you look at this game versus the Bristol City game, where it was just insipid, boring, toothless, all that stuff. And even though I think, to your point, Dux was leggy, arguably. I mean, Roberts has had 2 unbelievable chances. But we did create chances against Bristol. We didn't create anything. And I think probably what you're alluding to, I don't want to get too down on them, because ultimately, again, you take a step back. It's Boro away. It's a tough game. They were second in the league or third in the league. They're a battle-hardened championship side. And if you go there and you lose 2-1, is that beyond the pale? I think it's just in the context of 4-0, piss the league. We're sorted. We've got everything.
Yeah.
And like I said, you'd think after 46 seasons going up the Blues, I'd probably learn, and I definitely haven't, which is fucking annoying. But so do you want to just talk about the Duck and maybe the subs, because I think that's quite interesting to go through.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that we have to remember, and I was thinking about this while we were talking about set pieces as well, is a lot of what we've brought into this season was built upon League One standard, wasn't it? So I was thinking about our set pieces, and I was thinking we're bringing attacking and defensive set pieces from that were effective in League One and trying to bring them into the Championship. And I think what we're forgetting is that teams in the Championship have the tools to outdo you as well. That's what we have to remember. Like League One, more often than not, the teams didn't have either the quality or the ideas to be able to break you down and how you want to play. So the last two games, the Duck has been a little bit of an unknown quantity, hasn't he? Because he hasn't played all that often. The teams that have come up against us, there's not really any sort of facts or highlights or data for the opposition to really plan to how to play against him. What I think Middlesbrough have done is they've looked and gone, well, if we just keep tight to him, they've got to either pump the ball up to him or that he's going to have rely on having this perfect first touch. And basically, the two centre halves they had on the pitch were players who have played in the Premier League with Middlesbrough. You know, they are good centre halves. I know Ayling hasn't always been a centre half, but he's a good, very, very seasoned professional and a great defender, and he always has been. So the task was always going to be difficult for the Duck against those two. And I think they, credit where it's due, I think they just stopped him from being able to get involved. When you then add that to a guy who hasn't started a game of football since the Swansea match, I think that was the only league start he had for us as well. He's done 3 games back to back. He's been heavily involved in the previous 2 games as well. You don't know exactly how much of a toll that's taken on him. So then having to come up against that battle was probably quite disheartening for him. And it was probably a lot sort of more physical and demanding than he perhaps expected. So I think, we chalk it off as just a bad day at the office for him, probably down to the fact that it was good defending. We weren't quite at our best again, but it's just one of those days. That wouldn't stop me from putting him in the lineup again in the next game because I still think obviously we're going to have to replace Paik now, but I still think you start with that team more often than not now until, like we said the other day, until we've proved that no longer works.
Yeah.
In terms of the subs, I mean, I've become sort of used to the sort of likely changes now. Even they're sort of quite predictable, like the starting lineups. You know, you're always going to see an Anderson and Kyogo early doors now. That just tends to be the given if things aren't quite going to plan, or even if they are going to plan. To be honest, it just seems to be right. Okay, these two aren't a huge drop off in theory from what we've got, and then you start going through the rest of the subs, and it is just an obvious decline in ability, in my opinion. Not to say they're bad players, but just with what they're replacing. Kyogo again. I mean, look, I don't want to be too critical on him because I am convinced at some point it's going to work, but I'm starting to get to a point. Well, but I'm starting to get to a point where I'm wondering whether bringing him on when he is becoming detrimental now, because he just doesn't seem to be able to get his head in the game now, and I almost feel like we need, arguably, like Norwich at home the next game, which we'll cover in another pod, I think, but that might be a really good opportunity for a team that are right down there that you're probably going to have a good chance against. That would be a real opportunity, I think, to bring him in and just go, right, what can you do from the start? For example, bringing him on and giving him 40 minutes, which is a fair amount of time to try and impact. Just, I don't know, he seems to be getting almost less likely to score than more likely. And I just worry that it's causing more harm than good at the minute. So, yeah, I mean, maybe shelve that. The only other, obviously, problem we've got there, though, is that if you start with Stanno and the Duck after Kyogo, you then go into Dykes, aren't you, as your option to bring on up top. So it is a bit of a rock and a hard place. But I am just starting to get a little bit worried about it.
But I think it depends in what context, because if you, I think with Dykes, when he comes on, it doesn't really matter, in my view, what the state of the game is, because if you if you're chasing the game, you need a goal. You know that he's done that a number of times for us. So for me, that's a tick in the box. If it's quite tight, as somebody to defend from the front, I think he's fine. He does get his foot in. The quality, it is a downgrade, but I don't think we drop off from a defensive point of view. And then, if we're winning, same again. He can protect the ball. He can take. He can't link up as well as Dukes, but I mean, he's still capable. But for me, Dykes is always it should be 15 minutes to go, not
Yeah,
half an hour to go. Um, I didn't understand the subs. I didn't not the personnel, the timing.
yeah,
I just we'd had a massive chance with Stanno. Robertson had a massive chance. We were dominating the ball and looking threatening, and then you change it, and it was only like I don't even think we'd hit the hour mark. I think it was like 56
no,
minutes, and you're like, it's like
yeah,
fucking hell. They've just had a 15-minute break. To give him 10 minutes. If
yeah,
because if it was fundamentally wrong, do it at half time.
yeah,
I was just a bit confused. I don't want to criticise him for obvious reasons, but it just didn't make sense to me. And I hear what you're saying about Kyogo, but the reality of that is, if he comes in, who goes out?
yeah,
Now, you know, you ain't gonna drop Stano, and I think if Dukes has now got however how long 10 days rest or whatever it is, a bit longer than that, he has to start. He has to
yeah,
start, and then you're tinkering with should we drop Demi and put Stano wide and put Kyogo up top, and all of a sudden something that's been working, and I'd even
yeah.
say it was working against Boro. And I don't want to do Leonard down, but I think if Paik had maybe played 90 minutes, that little bit of extra quality might got us a point.
Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah.
But yeah, we said it in the last pod. I don't know whether the fans would be cheering Kyogo as much as we were when they missed it. When he misses a
Yeah,
chance at 3-0 and 4-0, it doesn't matter. When he misses a chance at 2-1, it sort of does.
yeah.
I don't know, mate. I hear what you're saying. He just needs a break, doesn't he? He just needs a
I think
break.
I think I said it before. So and just sort of to clarify, yeah, my argument isn't that he should start against Norwich. What I'm trying to say is that I think that would be the kind of game that if you
Yeah,
were ever going to give him a start, that's your sort of opposition.
yeah,
Um, in terms of the rest of the subs and things like Stano and so we did start by talking about that sort of chance that he had, and I watched it a couple of times. Obviously, I watched it at the time, and then I watched it afterwards, and I don't know what it is. So we've got used to Stano being just this sort of finisher, haven't we, for the last 2.5 years now? But what we've started to see is that he's not just that, is he? He's bringing other people into play
yeah,
now, and I genuinely think he in his mind's eye. I don't know why. I think he believed that the best option at that point was to find space for the duck and square it for him to put it in the net. And there was just when he got into the box. So previously, I'd have been so confident of him scoring. I never got the impression with that run that he was ever going to try and shoot. He always, to me, looked like he was shaping himself to play it across to the duck, but the duck just never managed to get himself in enough space for that to be on.
yeah,
And then I think it just came down to that. I've got to do something now because the keeper's in front of me. And I think he was just caught between sort of pass and shot. Because if he'd have gone into the box knowing what he was going to do, how many times have we seen him go on these mad runs and absolutely leather it into the roof of the net? And
yeah,
he doesn't hesitate, he just hits it. But this teamwork that has become a real asset of ours, and he is included in that particular instance, is probably what's sort of held him back, because I think he was trying desperately to think, well, the best option of scoring here is square it and empty net pretty much. On another day, he has that chance again, and like you said, he hits the bottom corner, or he absolutely rifles it past the keeper, or he maybe takes it round him because the keeper had committed quite early. So I think in terms of the save that the keeper made, I think he just hedged his bets and thought, well, he's probably going to go that side.
yeah,
I might as well make a move that way, and hopefully that's what he does, and that's what worked out. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of my friends who were at the game, and I know it is very different when you're watching it live to sort of watching it on the TV and highlights and whatever else. But I was a little bit confused because we just in that second half we were playing with a lot of the ball down that left hand side, and I just started to see that Gray was not. beating his man necessarily, but he was causing his man problems. And I was again surprised then that sort of 10 minutes into that half, he's been withdrawn again. And Anderson didn't do anything wrong, and we've been very complimentary of Anderson because I think we're both of the opinion that he adds something to this team in the right moments. I just don't know if that was the right moment. I think we'd started to build up some momentum. We'd started to cause them problems. We had an early chance. We were getting in that end of the pitch. You make changes, and then it all has to change because now two new players have to get up to speed and have to try and sort of just like for like replace. Well, they weren't like for like players, so the timing was off. I think what he's done recently is he's done that as his sort of blueprint, hasn't he? The subs have come on just before the hour, and it's worked. And I think he probably just naively thought again, right, it's we haven't scored the second goal. Let's bring these two players on now, and hopefully that will get us there. And there'll be times throughout the season where he does that, and it will work, and we'll get the result that we want. As I say, it just didn't quite happen on Saturday. But I didn't at the end of the game sit back and think, oh, that was rubbish, that was awful. Like you said about Bristol City, that is how I felt against Bristol City. I thought that was just 95 minutes that we just didn't do anything. We couldn't link the play. We couldn't find passes. We didn't really have any meaningful efforts. This wasn't like that. This was just a case of they've defended better than we have. They've taken their chances. And when we talked about it the other day, and we probably because we're biased, aren't we? And we're rose-tinted glasses or blue-tinted glasses. You just think back-to-back 4-0s, they don't have a manager technically. And, all the disruption that's going to have caused the day before, you look at that and you think, surely that gives us a shoe-in, doesn't it? But what you have to then forget is, and we've been there when we had that 12-point, the 9-point deduction, is what you forget is how much that galvanizes a team, how much that allows them to find an extra 10, 15% that perhaps they didn't have before, just because everything's against them. No one's expecting them to do anything. You don't know what the sort of the bond they have with that guy is either. The coaching staff, they might have more to do with the coaching staff than the manager. So there's all these things that you just forget, don't you? Because you're looking at it thinking, look at all these things that are going wrong for Middlesbrough. We should beat them. But like you said, they were third in the league at the start of the day. They're second in the league now. They're at home. We're away. We've just got promoted from League One. So if you looked at it on a piece of paper like that, you'd go, well, surely odds on Middlesbrough to win that game.
Yeah.
Anything else other than that is a bonus. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it now. I'm thinking, and we've talked about it a lot, and we've sort of talked about how you would segment a division and say where you should or shouldn't get your points. I'd have been quite comfortable at the start of the season writing Middlesbrough away off as a no point and just going, we might not win there, and that's not the end of the world. That's probably not going to define our season. Maybe if we were at home and we were playing Middlesbrough, then it's a whole different story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's easy to get a bit upset because, on a great run, scoring loads of goals, and it's kind of hit a bit of a brick wall all of a sudden. But there's time now, 2 weeks, to put that to bed and maybe, hopefully, figure out how to defend corners.
Well, yeah, and also, the good thing, and it's a bit harsh on him, but with Paik's injury, he's not going to be going anywhere international duty, is he?
No.
So you just got to hope that whatever he's done, he's a 2-weeker, not a 2-monther, because I think the only logical thing that the gaffer can do, in my mind, is that Iwata plays in the middle with Doyle and then Samuel comes in at right back, which the key to that is you've still got Doyle, you've still got the ball player, the positive midfielder. Whilst Iwata probably isn't, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's too much difference between him and Paik, but obviously Paik over the last few weeks have been very, very strong. So, but so's Iwata. So I'd probably worry a bit more about Samuel playing right back than Iwata coming into the middle with Doyle. But so I do think we can maintain the same structure and I think the output and the pressure and the physicality and the way we close as a unit, I think we still keep that. So, and look, Norwich, I think they've sacked their manager. So
Yeah.
We've got to go through that again. But yeah, it's if you can ever take positives out of defeat, there was plenty there. There was still
Yeah.
enough to look at that and say that isn't a million miles away from the way we've been playing. But I do think the Paik injury was massive for us on a lot of
Yeah.
fronts. I just think
Yeah.
it was just a bit of a kick in the teeth because he's been so good. I mean, just
Yeah.
ridiculously good. But yeah, we will see. So we've got a bit of a break now, mate, haven't we?
We have. Yeah, we have. I think 2 weeks, isn't it? Is it the trying to have a look at when the
Is it
Norwich game is?
22nd, is it? I don't know.
That sounds right. Yeah, I think it is the 22nd, isn't it? So yeah,
Yeah.
2 weeks. 2 weeks to reflect and refresh, and anybody that might have been starting to feel a little bit leggy. I mean, that's what the murmurings around the Riverside was that Gray was looking quite leggy by all accounts.
Yeah.
He obviously is one of the players that's going to go off to international duty. So then, again, we'll do a preview of Norwich at a later date, but that might be then an opportunity for an Anderson to come in and maybe just freshen things up. But again, we need to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. We need to hear a little bit more about Paik, and that sometimes with these injuries, you sort of the answer straight away, don't you? And I didn't see it as it happened, so I don't know exactly the extent of the injury and how bad it was. From what I understand, it was just sort of the way he fell and landed, but he didn't look very comfortable, put it that way. He looked like he was in a lot of pain. I don't know how long we're going to miss him for, but sometimes with these injuries, you hear something quite sort of soon afterwards. I've tried looking today, and there isn't really much in terms of what people actually think it is. And I don't know if I find that comforting or concerning, because does that mean that there's loads of swelling and inflammation, which means they can't yet see what it is?
Yeah.
Or is it that it's just perhaps not as bad as they expected, so they're not worried about it, therefore they're not talking about it? So it's a hard one to know. He's going to be a big loss if he does miss a handful of games. Likely, even if he is okay where it's not so bad, he probably still isn't going to play, I don't think, because he's probably still going to need recovery time. But as I say, we'll see. We'll know a lot more over the next 2 weeks as to whether he's going to be back or not. I hope he is, but I also don't want him to be rushed back in if he's not.
Yeah, and
obviously,
December's a bonkers month, isn't it? Absolutely crackers.
Well, there's no international breaks until March then, so you've literally got 4 months of just non-stop weekends with the occasional midweek football. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit chaotic, I think.
Indeed. Right. Well, unfortunately, we finish on a loss before the international break. But mate, I look forward to speaking to you prior to the Norwich game, and hopefully we'll find out a little bit more on who is and who isn't available.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Well, but between now and then, we've got the delights of international football. And yeah, just hopefully anybody that's playing, obviously from a blue side, comes back without any injuries, and we can kick on again going into what is going to be a very busy 6 to 8 weeks. So let's see where we can get to. But between now and then, keep right on.